Welcome to the strategic plan follow-up meeting. I hope everybody's having a great day. My name is Selena Samuel, and I have the privilege of serving as the Senior Vice President of Business Operations. Thank you for going on this journey with us in developing the strategic plan for LCC for the next 3 years. I'd like to start off this meeting with a welcome from our president, Dr. Steve Robinson. He is what I call the chief advocate for Lansing Community College. He just does such a wonderful job. And he's also the architect of how we're doing our strategic planning and making sure that we're focused on transparency. So if you can, do me a favor, let's give a round of applause for Dr. Robinson as he comes to provide a welcome to us. Dr. Robinson?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Samuel. Hello, everyone, and thank you to everyone who's joined us. I will be brief because we have some work to do, but I want to start off by thanking everyone for their engagement and their attention to this important process. As you'll hear, we started off with what I would call a good framework or a good scaffolding for strategic planning. There were some things that we wanted to do differently, and we had a lot of listening and conversation to do. That listening and those conversations have been going on for some time, and we're getting to the point where we can start to crystallize or synthesize some of what we've learned into some concrete action steps, and you're going to hear about that today. So the other thing I would like to say before we move on is, in consultation with Dr. Samuel and the entire team, one of our most important values is to be very transparent about all this work. Everything that we've been doing, all the information we've been generating, will be provided out for everyone to see. This is a group project of group projects. And so I really, really want to thank everyone for their time, their attention, because we are forging a path forward for our college. And that's exactly what this whole process is. So just please feel welcomed, feel valued, and let's get to work because it's time to start getting into teams, isn't it, Dr. Samuel?
It is. Thank you, Dr. Robinson, and we appreciate that warm welcome. So what I'd like to do is just get started because, as Dr. Robinson said, we have a lot of work to do, and we definitely value your time. So first things first, why are we here? Yes, it was on our schedule, and it was an activity that we said was going to be a part of strategic planning. But in terms of the true purpose for this meeting, number one, we want to thank you for your participation in the strategic planning process. And then we want to review the feedback that we've received and summarized from the Friday sessions and from the student and community sessions. And then we also want to learn how project charters are going to impact strategic planning at the college, and then discuss next steps. And at the end of this presentation, we will have a Q&A where Dr. Robinson, myself, the provost, and all of our executive leaders will be here to answer any questions that you may have with respect to any of these focus areas. So I want to make sure you understand that. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind is that because this is an interesting presentation where we're going to be going over feedback that we receive for each focus area, I thought it would be important for you to have the presentation and be able to follow along with me. So if you go to your MyLCC website, this presentation is already posted on the same page where the rest of the presentations and videos are posted for this 2021 strategic planning process. So you can go out there and you can follow along with me because I may leave a slide and you may want to go back to a slide. And so since this is such an important conversation, I thought you should have that as we go through it. So that's one thing that I want you to keep in mind. Now, the information that's going to be shared with you today is a summary of the feedback that we received. It's not all of the feedback, but I was very happy to have some of your colleagues work together to put everything that we received from our sessions together, to copy and paste everything that everybody said, every word, into a document. And as Dr. Robinson said, we're going to provide that document for everybody to see so that we all know what came in and that we continue in our vein of being transparent with this process. So today we're just going to focus on the recurring themes so that you know for each focus area what those recurring themes were. So that's really important. And the reason why we want to share that with you is because at the end of this presentation, we're going to be inviting you to send an email to strategicplan@lcc.edu to let us know which focus area you would like to work on, if any. right now, I believe we have about 6 people who have agreed to participate in this process. So I do encourage others to go to strategicplan@lcc.edu to offer their participation. So the other thing that I want to talk about is just that, again, we received a lot of information, and I want to make sure everybody knows that some of the information that we received was strategic in nature, and it will easily be incorporated into the strategic planning process. However, there was some information that we received that represent work that's already being done and will continue to be done. And so those type of things, at a certain point, we will make sure that we communicate to you so that you can understand what those are, because sometimes it's just that maybe some people don't know that we're doing certain things that are already being done. So we'll make sure that we make a note of those things. The other thing is that some of the things that people put into their comment section was things that represent things that are kind of easy for us to do. They're not really strategic, but it's just kind of something that's easy for us to implement. And so Dr. Robinson and the rest of the leadership team, we're going to be looking at those things. And when we see them, if it's something that we can implement quickly, then it's something that we'll do, and it won't be a part of a strategic planning process. It will be on the list that we're going to call the Nike list. It's the just do it list. And that's Dr. Robinson's term, not mine. It's just do it. There are certain things that maybe we're able to just do. And if we are, then we will. And then there'll also be some other things that would be more applicable for the Equity Action Plan and have actually been identified as projects as a part of the Equity Action Plan already. So we'll want those things to be moved into that area. And then there are some things that may be more applicable for the Academic Master Plan. And so as we go through our strategic planning process, the people that are on those work groups, they're going to be able to identify those things, and they're going to be able to know that certain things are going to be taken care of elsewhere. So I just wanted to kind of lay that groundwork so that you would know what we're looking at. Every piece of feedback that we received is important, and we are going to pay very close attention to it. And so I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. So again, as we go through this presentation, you can go to the strategic directions page and follow along with me. That way, if I leave a page and you want to stay there, you can do so. First, I want to get started with strategic planning by the numbers. So what happened here? We had sessions in February for our employees, and at each session between the WebEx and the YouTube viewers, we had over 100 people attend. And so I do want to say kudos to everyone, because you did that. You attended, you showed that you care about what's happening at this college. So I want to personally thank you for doing that, and thank you for being invested in what happens in the future. And as I said, you have this particular PowerPoint, so you can look at those numbers in detail if you'd like. But again, we had over 100 people attend each of our sessions. Now, when it comes to the community and student listening sessions, we had less participation, but we had a great dialogue at all of those sessions. As you can see, we had over 20 people participate in each of those sessions, and we also had some people do it via WebEx and YouTube. We did have one student that contacted us via social media and gave us a comment, and then we had an email address, strategicplan@lcc.edu, where we received 56 emails. So that's really the feedback that came in, and I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you. And also on this page, you'll see some additional information about how we advertise this event outside of what you saw in the STAR or the operations email. So thank you, everybody, for your participation again. So what I'd like to do is go focus area by focus area and talk about them a little bit. So the first one is community engagement. And we provided a definition, and the first thing we asked everybody is, are we missing anything from this definition? And I can't share everything that we heard, but here are a couple things that we heard. And again, as Dr. Robinson mentioned earlier, all of the feedback, every single comment on the definition of each focus area, and every idea that came across will be shared on the strategic directions webpage. So you can be sure to look out for that sometime next week. But for today, I'd like to share with you that people said that the community engagement definition, that we should add something about civic organizations, alumni, and donors, that we should add something about international outreach, and also that we should focus on being a leading educational institution. So those are just some of the thoughts that came across. We'll definitely share more with you later, but I just wanted to show you a little bit so you can see what came in and understand that we did hear you. And when each focus area gets together, they'll have an opportunity to review the definitions. In terms of recurring themes, here's what we have for community engagement. And I'd like to say that I did not actually put these recurring themes together. As I mentioned earlier, a group of your colleagues actually put all this information together. And at this time, while we're going through the recurring theme, I'd like to personally thank them. The team was led by Marilyn Twine. So thank you, Marilyn. But she had working with her Juliana Blaine, Janaea Royal, and Linda Waldecker. And so I do want to say a special thank you for all of them for putting all the information together and looking at this so that we can have some idea of what our recurring theme was. So thank you. These did not come from me. They did not come from the president. They did not come from anybody on ELT. This came from all of our employees. We tried to make this very stakeholder driven. So we had people that were part of our stakeholder community put this together. So again, in terms of our recurring theme, you can see that a conversation came across about surveys. We need to make sure that we're surveying our community so that we know what they're interested in. We need to provide proactive listening. We need to make sure that we're focused on success stories and that we have innovative recruiting. There was some emphasis on a global perspective and making sure that we're thinking globally and that we're thinking about our international students. That was something that came up a lot. There was a conversation about career placement and making sure that students know where they can be placed based on the type of career that they choose. There was also an emphasis on making sure that students understand the benefits of getting a degree or a certificate. And there was also some conversation about inclusive excellence. So this isn't everything that came across, but I tell you what, this is a really good representation of what we've seen. And these are the things that came across over and over again. So in terms of audacious goals for community engagement, we had more than this, but I just want to share this with you. So one of the things that people said is we should become a household name in the community. We should start grassroots initiatives to inspire Lansing locals to want to work at LCC. We should win the Aspen Prize for Best Community College in the country. We should create a structure that provides opportunities for employees to do more volunteer work in the community. So these are some of the things that came across. And I will say the one that I saw come across the most was the Aspen Prize. And so I thought that was very interesting that a lot of people mentioned that. So when you do end up seeing the feedback, you'll notice that it is mentioned a lot and it's repetitive, but we did not want to delete or take away. We wanted to make sure that people were able to see the recurring themes. So moving on to our next area, leadership, culture, and communication. In terms of that definition, the changes that were suggested was that we highlight learning and the campus environment. So what that means is in our definition, we didn't really talk about our campus environment. So that's interesting. I do believe that that's part of the culture. So that was a good observation. The other thing was incorporate government into our communication portion. So if you look at the definition of communication, we mentioned employees, students in the community, and someone is saying that we need to also mention the government. So thank you for those suggestions. In terms of the recurring themes, there are a lot of people that would like more robust professional development, expanded employee recognition. They would like us to post our jobs in diverse places and retain remote work locations following the pandemic. We had a lot of conversation about employee empowerment and talking to employees about their career goals and encouraging and valuing employee feedback. So those are all good things. And when I look at this, some of you that are familiar with some of the work that we do here, you may be very familiar with the employee recognition programs that we expanded through the last strategic planning process. And it's important to note that we will certainly continue that. And if there's anyone who paid attention to our equity action plan, you'll know that part of that plan is to make sure that we post jobs in diverse places. So that's really good. Thank you for that feedback. In terms of the audacious goals, we'll highlight two that we heard more than once. So the first one, create a shadowing program that allows current employees to shadow other career positions. And this is something that we've seen and talked about a little bit. So appreciate everyone for bringing that up. The next thing was more robust financial backing from the college toward the education of promising employees. So that is something that we heard more than once. And so I wanted to make sure that that was here on this slide. When we look at engaged learning and student success, the definition in terms of suggested changes, we're hearing that we should include lifelong learning skills and professional aspirations. We should expand personal goals to include the ability to be a good citizen. We should also replace the word using with exploring. So those are all great suggestions. And when the team that's going to work on engaged learning and student success get together, they can figure out how they can incorporate some of these ideas. For student success, the suggestions that we have is that we measure student success in a number of different ways. So we should make sure that we acknowledge that. The second thing is we need to embrace the diversity of thought and being that would enhance their lifelong learning skills. So that was kind of a repetitive theme, focusing on lifelong learning skills. In terms of the recurring themes, peer-to-peer mentorship, integrate the real world into the classroom, have feedback at the end of each class, not 16 weeks. Find ways to make non-traditional students feel less out of place and unsure. Require that students complete D2L orientation. Examine what we've done in the past and why it didn't work. Build digital badging programs to address student needs. So those are all some ideas, and some of those I've heard before, so I'm not surprised to see them as recurring themes. So thank you everybody for that input. In terms of the audacious goals for this area, what we received was that we should provide more staffing and resources to engage all students. We should have more full-time faculty. We should explore other models for online classes where students can interact in ways other than web conferencing. And we should improve communication across the college, open lines of communication between faculty, students, and services, etc. So those are some interesting audacious goals. In terms of competitiveness and innovation, some of the suggestions that we received is that we need more clarification on competitiveness. So what do we mean by competitiveness? And so as we're going through this, I challenge people to think about this. Especially members of ELT, think about competitiveness. And when we go to our Q&A, if you have any thoughts about how we can expand that, feel free to share that. In addition to that, for those of you who may have joined us after we started, we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions about anything that you see in this presentation, you can write them down and be prepared to ask those questions at the end of this presentation. So in terms of suggested changes, I'll just mention a couple of other things. We were asked to be ethical within the definition. So that's something that we didn't have in there, but I can assure you from most of my conversations with everybody here at the college, I think being ethical is one of our top priorities. So thank you for pointing that out. In terms of recurring themes, we have intersect more with K through 12 partners, tie technology to market relevance, create electronic vehicle pipeline program, potentially with General Motors, canvas the community, expand advisory boards, start career exploration earlier, and have additional promotion of seaweed. And of these, I know I did hear some conversation about advisory boards because there were a lot of people that were not aware that Arts and Sciences does have advisory boards, and that's something that maybe Dean Hoagland can speak to at some point. So these are recurring themes for competitiveness and innovation. In terms of our audacious goals, we are told that we should consider enrollment deals, re-expand our district network, hold events that showcase individual departments, have an awareness of the day, week, month for every marginalized group, and develop faculty professional development via CTE. And I will say there were some great comments about CTE and how important they are and the great work that they do there. So that's something that you'll see when you do get the full list of comments. So kudos to CTE. And I think that we've also had some discussions in ODI with respect to how we can make sure that we're celebrating all marginalized groups. So thank you for those comments. In terms of resource management and fiscal responsibility, when it came to that definition, there was another comment about ethics. So I think that's really interesting because we did get that comment a couple times to make sure that our definitions consider ethics. The other thing is consider adding decisions must support the overarching college mission. So, and then the last one, over-reliance on data can be problematic. So, and I think that was a comment that came across because we say in this definition that we want to make data-informed and transparent decisions. So we appreciate all of those comments. In terms of recurring themes, more faculty participation in the grant writing process, more robust alumni network, restart early LCC, reduce costs for students, shared governance should be across all areas, including finance, schedule Friday and weekend classes in one building, look at the cost of education versus the salary ratio. So those are just some things that came up. And I know that Dr. Glasgow is with us today, and if there's any comments when we get towards the Q&A that Dr. Glasgow would like to share with respect to faculty participate in grant writing process, we certainly welcome that conversation. And let's see what else we have here. In terms of audacious goals, what we heard was that faculty and staff should exchange with other higher education institutions. So kind of allowing our faculty to go work somewhere else and learn, how they operate. The other thing was expand cybersecurity center to train police in cybersecurity and look at some income generating opportunities. And then we're also told that we could do a better job assessing needs before the next renovation. Combine classes with team teaching approach. So the first part of that, I think that's speaking to what we're doing with our buildings and making sure that we assess needs prior to renovations. And I know that obviously some of that activity occurs, but we certainly appreciate that recommendation. And then last, increased compensation for employees. That's something that we look at every year. And that's certainly something that our leaders in our collective bargaining units take pride in, I think, participating in that process. So thank you for those comments. Our last focus area, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So here, there were a couple suggested changes for diversity, specifically just making sure that we are referring to American Indians as indigenous. So that was the current terminology that's being suggested. So we appreciate that comment. In terms of equity, there's a comment that we should value the contributions of everyone by being intentional to include the language that would reflect this in our strategic plan as an aspirational document. In terms of inclusion, a question came up about adjunct faculty and does the definition represent this marginalized group? So the suggestion here is that adjunct faculty are a marginalized group, and I would welcome any comments from Dr. Bailey during the Q&A if you have anything that you would like to share with respect to that suggestion. In terms of recurring themes, DEI orientation and training and surveys, develop mentoring program, more diversity related outreach, more diverse workforce at LCC, DEI becoming a part of the culture, having cultural mixers open to everyone, recognize students as individuals and not stereotypes, and accessibility project development. So those are all good things. And I would say that in terms of more diverse workforce, that is definitely something that has been recommended through the Equity Action Plan. And the accessibility project development, that may be something that either Dr. Bailey or Dr. Welch may want to provide some comments on that particular recurring theme when we get to the Q&A. If we don't have any questions, that may be something you might want to expound on. In terms of audacious goals, double the number of minority faculty over a 5-year period, ensure that employee demographics align with the Lansing community, have one large celebration of multiple cultures every year. So those are some interesting ideas. Thank you for those. In terms of our community, we had a student and community listening session. We had 2 of those. So some of our comments were about being a national leader and making sure that we invest more in OER. Also making sure that we reconnect with anyone that started at LCC and stopped, looking to partner with other populations. What they specifically wrote was former court populations, but I think that could have been cohort, not really sure. But again, this is what we tried to do, was leave everything in the original state that people recommended it. So the next one is outreach engagement strategies tailored toward unique and special populations. One comment came in that it's hard to start innovation from the top. Let's try to do it from grassroots. Another comment, promote the wraparound supports that we have for our students and open up face-to-face classes because some people have challenges with online learning. So those were the comments that we received from the student and community groups via those listening sessions and also via social media. So what I want to do is quickly go over some next steps in terms of what we're going to do for strategic planning. I gave you a lot of information, but it was summary information, and I went through it relatively quickly because, as I said, you do have the PowerPoint at your disposal for you to go through. But what I really want to spend some time on here is the next steps. And what we've tried to do for every single strategic planning session, we've had a list of what those next steps are. So they're already on the website, embedded in other PowerPoint presentations, but they're also here for you because we want to make sure that it's crystal clear what this project is going to look like going forward. So first, we're going to establish our work groups for each strategic plan focus area. And I invite anyone that's interested in participating to send an email to strategicplan@lcc.edu. We're going to continue with the suggestion that we have a tri-lead for each strategic plan focus area. So again, we're looking for an ELT member to lead, an academic senate member, and a non-management employee to lead. We're hoping that each of these groups will have a maximum of 10 participants per work group, keeping in mind that each work group will be assigned someone from the Center for Data Science. The reason that someone from the Center for Data Science is going to be assigned is because we want to make sure that as we come up with our goals and projects, that we start to think about how can we measure our success? So we want to keep them involved from the front end. We're also going to have someone assigned from financial services because we want to make sure that as we're thinking about these things that we want to do, that we also think about those financial implications. So it's important for us to do that. That's something that we didn't specify the last time we did our strategic planning process, but we're hoping that by doing this and making sure that we have someone from CDS and financial services looking in on these work groups, that we will be able to, at the end of the day, have a good plan, that we already know how we're going to measure our success, and we already know what it means from a financial perspective. It's also important for you to know that each work group will have a minimum of 3 objectives for their specific focus area. And the reason that we want to do this is because, again, our focus is being strategic. We want to be strategic. So that's really what our focus is. And so we want to come up with 3 objectives that we can really focus and hone in on for each focus area. Now, each of those focus areas with their 3 objectives, they will also be tasked with identifying goals that can be supported, that will support those 3 objectives that we spoke about. And once we establish some goals, then we're going to think about 3 projects for each of those 3 objectives that we can do that would allow us to meet the overall objective that we have for the focus area. So basically, each focus area, we're expecting for them to have somewhere around 9 projects. So that's important. So we're looking at 9 strategic projects that will allow us to move forward. What we want to do is focus. And that's really important because we have a lot of things going on. There are some people that are already involved in the process for an academic master plan, and they're already on work groups for that. So we want to make sure that we're considerate about other things that are happening around the college. Same with the equity action plan. There's going to be people that are working on different aspects of that plan. So by focusing on 9 projects for each of our focus areas, we're going to be looking at making sure that we're not duplicating what's being done elsewhere, and that we're focusing on things that we know will move the needle. So when you are part of a work group, there's going to be an emphasis on prioritizing so that we can be very strategic and very intentional about our next move with each focus area. So if you want to kind of look at that, what we're basically saying is that the strategic focus area objectives and goals are going to lead us to strategies or strategic projects that we're going to be able to put in place so that we can achieve the focus area goals. And that's going to lead us to a measurement plan so that we know how we're going to measure our success. And we're going to put all those things together, and it's going to equal the strategic plan for the specific focus area. It's going to be the submission that the work group is going to submit for the strategic plan for that focus area. Each work group will be equipped with access to the previous strategic plan, feedback from the 2021 brainstorming and listening sessions. That means the employee, the student, and the community listening sessions, all of which truly all of us have access to because they are on our Strategic Directions website. But we're looking at those as tools for how we move forward. They're also going to be looking at the project charter process, which we're going to talk about a lot more later on today. And so they'll have instructions on how to do a project charter, and we'll also have worksheets to help facilitate the strategic planning process and to make sure that each group is working on the strategic plan and putting their objectives, goals, and their measurement plan together in the same way. The other thing that we're going to do is each group is going to be asked to consider the information provided, including the strategic issues identified during the strategic planning process. And so those of you that have been with us on this journey, you know that for every focus area, we have identified strategic issues that we really wanted to be mindful of, because we know that if we don't address those strategic issues, then they will address us. So we really want to be mindful of strategic issues as we go through this process. And our emphasis will be on new activities and enhancing the good work that has already been done. So for instance, one of the things that we heard a couple times through this process was that there's an emphasis on making sure that we celebrate our employees and that we have employee recognition. So in the last strategic plan, we created a whole bunch of ways that we acknowledge and support our employees. And so we will continue to do that because a lot of that is operational. So when we look at our strategic focus areas, it may not be that focusing on an employee appreciation program might not be a strategic planning project for this particular strategic plan, because it was something that was done in the last plan and continues to be operational. And what we'll do is use the feedback from this particular process to enhance that work. Moreover, we really want to focus on being strategic and forward thinking. We don't want to be operational. We want to be strategic, and there's a difference. So we want to make sure that we are looking at being strategic. The other thing that's important to know is that the work product from each work group will be submitted for inclusion in the strategic plan document that we're going to provide to the Board of Trustees. So this is really important work, and the work that the work group is going to do is different than what we did in this brainstorming session. Through these brainstorming sessions, we just threw out ideas. It'd be great if we do this. It'd be great if we do that. Well, this group is going to have to take all of those great ideas. They're going to have to look at them. They're going to have to confirm what the recurring themes are. They're going to have to confirm what we've already been doing, what's already in process. And then they're going to have to prioritize those new things and use those to come up with some goals and strategic projects for the future. So it will be a process and it will be work that will be involved. And so the work is going to take place over the course of the months of April and May, and it's going to be a lot of work. And so the reason that we wanted to meet today is to kind of go over those things, because whenever we're asking people to do things, it's really unfair to not give you the full picture of it. And so we want to make sure that you understand the full picture, that it is a work group situation. It's a very collaborative work group, and it's a great opportunity for people that have ideas that they want to share and people that want to help move the college forward in a strategic direction. So it's a really good opportunity, but it's work. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting, but it's going to be work. And so I want to make sure that I'm very honest with everybody about what that process will be like. And in that same vein, because we know that it's going to be work, and part of that work is doing a project charter, which is something that all of us are not used to doing, or may have done, but done it differently than how LCC plans on using project charters. And so what I've done is I've asked Matt Fall to come and do a presentation on project charters and to help us understand why do we even want to do a project charter during the strategic planning process? What's the purpose? How's it going to help us? And what does this really look like? And so we want him to share that with you so that at the end of his presentation, it can really help you understand, okay, do I really want to be involved in this? That's number one. And number two, it will help you understand, okay, I'm already on a work group for the academic master plan. Is this something that I want to do realistically over the next 2 months? So I'm really, really glad that Matt is here to share this with us, because we really want the strategic plan to be a grassroots effort, but we do need participation and we need people that are going to be able to focus their time on this. So with that, I want to turn it over to Matt. And again, after Matt, we'll come back and I'll have some closing comments from Dr. Robinson and Dr. Welch. And after that, we're going to open it up to Q&A and also additional comments from our executive leadership team. So I know this is a lot, but we'll definitely get to an interactive portion where you guys can provide feedback and ask questions. So thank you for your continued time and attention. Matt?
Thanks, Selena. Excellent job as always. So this is a project, even though it's in black and white, which I realized the irony of that when this looks like, paperwork and boring stuff. This is actually something I get kind of excited about, because taking the time at the beginning of a project to really define what that project is and how it fits into the bigger scope of things actually saves a lot of time and frustration down the road. And what we're really trying to be intentional about this year during this refresh is making sure that our projects are closely aligned with the strategic focus areas. It should be really, really obvious to you as you're working on, if you happen to be in a group that's working on one of these strategic projects, how that ties into the objectives of your strategic focus area and how that ties into the overarching strategic plan. Next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So on the right side is probably too small and too faint to read copy of what a project charter looks like. This is a template that I've played around with over the years, and it's pretty close to something that I used early in my career, but I've modified it a bit to fit better into our world. There are really only a few components to the project charter. At the very top, he's got some descriptive information about when this thing is happening, who's putting the charter together, and what category you're aligning to. This is really important, not today, not tomorrow, but a year or 2 years or 3 years down the road. This helps us with a concept called knowledge management, where we start to track projects that we've done over time, and we know who worked on it. We can go back and tap them and say, hey, how did this happen? What were some of the outcomes? What were some of the learnings? We know who the expert on that project was. Then we get into a problem statement, objectives, scope, timeline, measures, and stakeholders. The last section, that notes and barriers piece, That's something I've recently added onto this, and it's just a good place to drop some general thoughts. There's some regulatory stuff that's coming up, or as you're starting to fill this thing out and it's kind of in its draft form, are you having thoughts about, hey, maybe this overlaps with some other areas or something like that? And it's just a way to keep all of that together in one spot. Okay, so the first part of this, and really I'm going to just touch on the first, I'm going to touch on problem statement, objective scope, and I'm going to talk a little bit about measures. The timeline and the stakeholders piece are pretty straightforward with the prompts that are in the form. And there's a representative from CDS in each one of these strategic plan focus areas to help facilitate these project charters as they're getting filled out anyway. So I just really want to kind of hit on the most important piece for us for the alignment component, and that's really going to be what problem are you trying to solve, what are you trying to get done with this project, and how big is this project? Okay, I think that's good. Next slide, please. Okay, the biggest issue I always see with problem statements is people try to put too much information into a problem statement. And usually that ends with some type of solution getting snuck in there, even if it doesn't feel like a solution. There's a cause assigned or something like that. Usually the statement will end with a comment like due to fill in the blank, and at that point you've gone too far with the problem statement. This is just a clear and concise statement of the issue and why it's an important problem. Go to the next slide, and then I have, so my apologies if there ever was a READ 101 course. I'm just using this as an example of how to write a clear problem statement. For the past 6 semesters, course success rates for online sections of READ 101 have averaged 70%. In the fall 2019 semester, these course success rates dropped 40%. This is a really concise, clear, fact-based problem statement. It's really clear what the problem is here. We've got a little bit of data to show the impact and how large of an issue this may be. And I've got a note in here that we might suspect a cause or causes, but this is not the place to put that in. So if you changed textbooks going into that semester and you're trying to attribute the sudden drop in success rate to the textbook, that might be part of it that you find out. But as you dig into this, there might be other things that come in place. And if you put a solution or you put a cause into the problem statement, you shut yourself off right away to any other creative or non-standard things that might have snuck in here and derailed your success. Okay, thank you. The next piece is the objectives, and this is essentially what you're trying to accomplish. The biggest mistake I see on this is that people will restate their problem statement just like, but solved. And that's not enough information. So this is actually going to link us right to our measures, even though measures is further down on this list. Dr. Hicks in my area likes to refer to this as being stated a lot like learning outcomes. So we're trying to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Those are really the parameters you want on your objectives. And these are going to be, you're starting to list out, okay, here's my problem. Once I've done these things, we've successfully completed this project. Switch to the next slide, please. So here I just have a couple examples again, and you can see I'm putting in, I'm chunking out success improvements. In this case, it's hard to tell, but believe me, since I made this example up, I'm being realistic about how quickly the improvements can happen. So I've got improved course success rate 15% by the end of the following semester, return to the pre-spring 2020 success rates by the following fall, improved spring 2020 success rates by 5% by the fall 2022. So I put due dates in there. I've put a measurable outcome that I'm trying to get to in there. But that doesn't mean that's all of the measures that I'm tracking for this project. Those are my criteria for success. This is where you start to really spend a little bit of time thinking about what are your primary measures. Now, primary measure is simply directly what am I trying to fix. In this case, in the problem statement, we want to tie back to the problem statement, we're talking about a decline in course success rate. That's obviously going to be my primary measure. A secondary measure, and this is a new piece for a lot of folks, it's just another way of looking at measuring success of your project. So in the course of achieving my primary metric, which in this case is course success rate, what do I not want to hurt? What do I want to not hurt? Yeah, there you go. That's the non-double negative version of that. So in this case, I made up another course. Reading 102 is a subsequent course. And so maybe we want to pay attention to that and make sure that as we're bringing up our success rates in that Read 101 course, we're not losing success rate in a Read 102 course. Okay, and then scope. This is a tricky piece, although it doesn't have to be. And this is the first place, as you start to nail down the scope of this project, you might find that you need to go back and kind of rework that problem statement and those objectives again. This is where you're going to start thinking through, like, how much do I want to take on in this project? And specifically, what do I not want to add to this project? As Bo always says, you know, what's in my lane and what's out of my lane of business. So here we're trying to put parameters up front early. This is your defense when you're trying to work through your project and somebody says, hey, did you think about adding this in or including this too? You know, that's outside of the scope of this project, and maybe that's a version 2.0 of this project, but right now we're working within this lane. If you allow the scope to continue to creep and continue to expand, you can do it, but it's got to be, you know, a special case. If you allow that to keep happening, there's no way you're going to hit your timeline that you set for yourself, your deadlines, and it'll become kind of a confused project. I think we've all experienced scope creep. I really don't need to hit on this very hard. So this, I've just given a real light example of it included and a not included. Anybody who's worked with me on these knows my scope section tends to be quite a bit longer than this. But here I'm really trying to narrow in on within the course itself. I thought real briefly about this example I was doing, and you know, it's possible that maybe prereqs or co-reqs start to get thrown into the discussion, and that's not really part of what we want to talk about for that particular problem. So we're going to upfront identify that's not part of this project. And maybe a little bit of the scope of who we're gonna look at. Okay, can you go back actually one slide from the scope? I just want to go back here just to show. So I'm not going to get into timeline too much, or actually at all beyond what's in there. But I will say you want this is part of the charter itself is a communication tool. When somebody asks, what's your project? How big is it? How long does it last? How much does it cost? A lot of those questions are answered on this charter. And so that is actually a really easy 1- or 2-page communication tool that you can hand off and say, hey, I'm just catching you up on this project. If you want to come in and join, this will give you a sense of the background of this thing. Timeline, this is the one part where I think people tend to not put enough thought into. So it's kind of like, hey, I'm going to start my project on this date and my project's going to end on that date, and that's all you end up with in the timeline. Well, that's actually not enough information for us. And your CDS representative who's going to help in the different strategic focus areas is going to walk people through a plan, do, check, act structure, and trying to assign dates to the planning activities, to the actualization of the project, to the checking time, to any continuous improvement actions based on data that's starting to come out of it. Your projects are dynamic. They're going to change a little bit as you get going down, and you know, maybe you find that the initial solution that you're trying to work towards is actually not going to be very very successful. You can change those things as you go, but all of this is going to be documented well. And then this helps all of us, like I said, down the road when we're trying to figure out, you know, what happened 3 years ago, what really was going on with that project, what led us to these decisions. You've got a whole documented path. Okay, please go forward and one more. So the bigger picture, I think Selena already touched on this pretty well in her slides. It's really important to have a clearly defined project.
We lost you, Matt.
Give him a
Can people
second.
hear me?
It looks like his phone.
Yes, we can hear you again.
Okay. I don't know. My phone keeps cutting out on me for some reason. So
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you fine.
sorry about that. So it's important to have a clearly defined project, clear objectives, clear scope. It's really hard to measure success of a project if it's really hard to tell what that project was. So we're trying to be good up front about clearly identifying the boundaries of this thing, It's also going to help us align our project, like I had said before, to the strategic plan focus area and to the overarching strategy of what we're trying to do. You're going to hear the term key process indicator or KPI a fair amount as we go through this process, because that's what we're linking to. And then the final step of this, actually I can go to the next slide. I have an example here. Again, maybe a little bit difficult to read, sorry, but this is, if anybody's worked with Dr. Hicks, again, this is out of, she uses this as an assessment plan tool, and it helps drive alignment. And this is the piece that CDS is going to be working on in the background with those strategic focus groups. Each one of those strategies are projects on this list, and they're tied to an objective for the strategic plan focus area. And this is the level of detail we want to get to in our measurement model, where we're looking at what are we, for every project, what data are we collecting, what are our targets, where is that data coming from, who's responsible for collecting or monitoring that data, how are we doing that, what's the analysis telling us. So there's a fair amount of work yet. We're still in that defining stage of the strategic plan as we're starting to pull things together. But what we're really looking for here, again, is we want alignment all the way from the strategies and the projects to the objectives of the strategic plan focus area, right to the KPI of the strategic plan itself. And it should be really clear at anywhere you're working at in there how you tie into all of the different parts of the plan. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. And I'm looking for a logical path here for people to be able to jump in and understand where we're going. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fall. If everybody could just give him a round of applause, a virtual round of applause. Thank you. You know, project charters, I think that's going to be a really important part of the work that we do. And so I appreciate Dr. Fall so much and for his team. And I think having their involvement in the beginning is going to help us so much when it comes to updating the board on what we're doing. And really having that project charter helps us understand the background. It helps us understand why we're doing what we're doing. And it helps us understand the measurements. So, and honestly, it helps us be strategic. So I'm so thankful to Dr. Fall and his team and look forward to having them as a part of each of these strategic planning teams. So thank you, Dr. Fall. That was an excellent presentation. And so the next portion that we're going to do, I'm going to review a couple things, and then we're going to go straight to Dr. Sally Welch, who's going to provide some feedback based on what we've heard today and what we've discussed. But before we go there, I want to remind you that every time we've met, we've provided the PowerPoint presentation. And as a part of that PowerPoint presentation has been how these teams are going to be formed. And so this presentation is no different. The information is there for you. The one thing that I want to just focus on is that if you want to participate in this process, please know that the activities will take place during the months of April and May. Some activity may extend to early June, but we're really hoping that these work groups can get together and get everything done in April and May. If you'd like to participate, you can send an email to strategicplan@lcc.edu. And everyone that sends and says that they want to be a part of it, we will be getting in contact with you within the next couple of weeks to let you know which team you'll be able to be on. And if for some reason there's not a team for you to be on, we'll absolutely let you know. But I just want to make sure that you have that. After today, I really would like people to sign up right now. As I said before, we have 6 people that have volunteered to participate, but we welcome additional participation. So, and that strategic plan website, the strategic plan email address is still available if you need to send just general questions or concerns. Beyond putting together this strategic plan, we've talked about the fact that the people that participate as tri-leads will invite them to stay on and work on some of those projects. And so the idea will be that when we provide quarterly updates to the Board of Trustees, a lot of that information will come from those tri-leads. So that's very important. And again, you have all this information, so I don't want to bore you. I want to have plenty of time for a Q&A. So we've got over an hour for Q&A, which is really, really good. But also, in addition to Q&A, I really am interested in getting some feedback from members of ELT about this process or about anything that you've heard that you think is important to bring up. So I'm going to start with our wonderful provost, Dr. Sally Welch. If you could join us and kind of give us a little bit of your take on this process and what you hope to see in the future.
I think my first word is wow. This is a lot of work and a lot of effort has gone into this, and just to see all of those ideas that people have come up with, just the creativity and the energy put into strategic planning, just wow in terms of this effort. I think a couple of things that Dr. Samuel talked about that are important to kind of keep in mind is the number of projects per theme. And it's very important that we think about this because we have multiple plans going on right now. And by having limited number of projects for the strategic plan, it allows us not to have, we like to use the term right now, 150 different projects going on at one time. So I think as a leadership team and as a college, trying to keep projects limited per strategic theme is really going to help us to accomplish a lot and move the needle. And that's hard because there's some really exciting projects that are going on in terms of the creativity that I saw in the plan, really unique ideas. The question is, you know, how do we accomplish all of these? And part of it is they'll be in this plan, but some of those I'm hoping to cherry pick to use for Achieving the Dream or the Academic Master Plan. If not those, to keep those ideas in mind for future use. The other part that I'd like to focus on is the project charter process. We've been using that in embedded academic support, and it's been very helpful for us to kind of zone in and understand what we're trying to solve and putting metrics around it. It's a new process for higher ed people in terms of how to think about problems, but it's a really good process for us to go through. And it will be helpful for us a year or two down the line to remember, why did we start the project? What was the original goal and objective, and how much progress we've made? So a couple things to end with. I'd like to thank Marilyn and her team for all the work that they did to create the themes from the feedback. According to Dr. Samuel, there's 99 pages of feedback that they went through and reviewed, and I can't wait to see that feedback. And then thank you to Dr. Samuel and Dr. Fall for their work today in presenting this in such a clear and concise manner. And I'm excited and ready to get to work. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Dr. Robinson.
Thanks, Dr. Welch. I would echo the words wow, and I would like to go back and underscore something Dr. Fall said about that wow. A lot of material has been laid upon the table just now, and that's because we spent a lot of time listening and recording what people said, and that's good. One of the things Dr. Fall said about project charters could be said about the process we're undertaking now. And that is, if we are disciplined and organized about this, we can actually, all this hard work that we just laid upon the table will save us time in the long run. We all know that we can't be all things to all people. We all know that there are projects that are beyond the mission and scope of our organization. And so as we go through this process of deciding which projects go into which themes, who is going to be the tri-lead for those, and organizing those work groups and putting together the charters, we're going to be saving ourselves time by getting results. And I'm really excited about that. So with that, I would like to move into the Q&A so that we can continue the dialogue part of this. It's very exciting. It's an exercise in listening and dialogue, and we're on the right path. And I really appreciate everyone being here.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. And with that, we'll move into the Q&A portion. And I just want to make sure everybody keeps in mind that sometime next week, we will be posting all of the information that we receive, because we want to make sure that you have it, whether you're on a strategic planning team or not. And also, as Dr. Welch mentioned, some of the information that we receive is going to be used to support what we're doing with Achieving the Dream, with the Academic Master Plan, and also with the Equity Action Plan. So just keep those things in mind. All of your feedback is important, and it will be considered. And with that, I'd like to open the floor for some questions. If you have a question, you can make a note in the chat, and then Patrick will call on you. Well, while you think about those questions, there were some ELT members that I did kind of mention their names during the event, and I would be certainly curious to get some of their feedback from what we've done so far and where they believe we're going into the future. So let's start with Dr. Bailey.
I was looking for my mute button as you were speaking, because I knew I was coming up. I am so excited about this strategic plan. Go LCC. We are LCC strong. I'm telling you, what great leadership and work and great community. I'm looking at the number of participants that are out here, and it's a credit to the great people we are. I say all the time, LCC is not a place, it's a people, and this is evident. Dr. Samuel, you mentioned in your presentation earlier wonderfully well about some of the comments that were made as it relates to, I think it was marginalized adjuncts. And I want to address that, because I think that's, first of all, I appreciate that term, and I'm wondering if the person that actually shared it is familiar with Gary Roth, as well as Hilbert Childress, who actually wrote 2 articles. One is called Students and the Promise of Social Mobility, and it's entitled The Educated Underclass. I'll put these in the chat maybe. And then also the Adjunct Underclass. And so I hadn't heard marginalized adjuncts before, but I have heard underclass. Wonderfully thought about. It's important that our entire college community understands that everybody is valued here at LCC. Regardless of your role, regardless of where you come into this space, we are creating inclusive excellence 365. And so for us, this means that job security and due process as it relates to all of our teaching faculty, all of our employees. This means that there should be, for us, we're focusing on a full range of faculty responsibilities and expectations and inclusion measures, teaching, scholarship, engagement, service, all of that. And we know that our adjunct faculty carry a lot of our teaching classes and courses, and all of our deans are aware and supportive of that. And we are strategic about making sure that they have a place at the table and their voices are heard. And so this plan, particularly as it relates to the overall plan and in the area of DEI, does include all, even if it's not strategically mentioned in the unique wording as marginalized or otherwise. And so, yes, thank you for that comment. And then just overall, I think it's important for our community to understand that your voice matters on how we go forward. We are because you are. And being a part of any of these teams is very, very important to our overall success. And so making sure that folks know that as far as that relates to DEI or any other area, we need to hear from you. And your big, audacious goals is exactly what's needed right now. And it's going to take some process. It's going to take some time. And as I said earlier today in another meeting, we can't really address a problem until we're into that problem. So it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to be great. And LCC is going to be the benefactors of it, as well as our students. So I hope that adds some values. And I'm always, always open for questions, partnership, collaborations, pull my ponytail, whatever you have to do so we can get together and make it happen. But thanks, Selena, for a moment in time. And I'm here to the very end of it.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Are there any questions for Dr. Bailey? If not, someone says, please don't pull Dr. Bailey's ponytail. So we'll make sure we don't do that. But if there are no questions for Dr. Bailey for right now, if you think of some later, please feel free to ask those. What I'd like to do is move on to Dean Bo Garcia. There was a question about competitiveness and, you know, making sure that we expound on that definition, that it really wasn't clear in how we define what do we mean by competitive? Why does the college need to be competitive? So if you can speak to that, and then afterwards, I'm going to ask James Mitchell, our executive director for human resources, to talk about some of the things that we are doing to make sure that we're hiring a diverse group of people to work at the college, because that is one of the recurring themes that came up a lot. And I'd like for Dr. Bailey to tag from James afterwards. So Bo, if you can talk about competition really quickly.
Sure. Thanks so much. And that's a great question. You know, when you consider competitiveness and innovation, if you are innovative, you will be competitive. It's a cause and effect. And I very much appreciate this process because it is very incremental and sequential. It's the type of process that results in very consistent, uniform results. And when you can put together innovation and competition as the theme for relevance, which is really the end sight vision for competitive innovation, you're working backwards from relevance, and you consider competition, direct, indirect, passive forms of competition in all areas of instruction, whether it's credit, non-credit, etc. When you consider all the variables that are in play that we as an institution compete on, it's very, very comprehensive. So coming up with a strategy whereby we're capitalizing upon the composite of all of our capacity in a very effective and efficient way is essential. And so I think that this theme is, obviously I am doing a shameless recruitment pitch, will be exciting and fun and highly relevant. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean Garcia. I appreciate that so much. And now I know we had some questions about what are we doing to make sure that we diversify our employee base, especially with faculty. And I think that James Mitchell and Dr. Bailey are working on some things based on the EAP. There's a lot that's already planned. So I'd like for them to tag team this question, but I'd like to start out with James. If you could provide some insight on that, because there are things that maybe people don't know that we're already doing. James?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Samuel, and good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate you letting me go first because I really kind of tremble at following Dr. Bailey. So, no, seriously, we have, I think, done a good assessment of our diversity in some areas, especially faculty, and we understand that there's certainly a lot of room for improvement. As far as the processes going forward, we have diversity baked into every step of our selection processes, including to make sure that we have diverse committees working on all of our openings that we are looking to fill. And also, we are getting our arms around the data to understand our data better so that we can understand and establish a good baseline. We've got some terrific initiatives that have been put in place, including the inclusion advocates on all of the search groups. We are looking at all of our paperwork as far as openings to make sure that the job descriptions and the hiring plans are really addressing the issue of to make sure that we optimize our opportunities to have a diverse pool. And to, as I indicated, we have the advocates on each of the search groups to keep things connected to diversity out on the forefront. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We recognize that we have a great opportunity to improve, and we are working very collaboratively with Dr. Bailey, and we're also working on staffing and funding in her area. But we do recognize that it doesn't belong to HR, it doesn't belong to ODI. This is an effort that's going to take all of us to focus on improving the diversity in our workforce, and also to create an environment where everyone is welcome.
Thank you, James. Dr. Bailey?
Well, how can I come behind that? What do I have to say left, James? You cleared it. I love HR. Everybody knows I'm a HR supporter, so don't say nothing bad about them in my presence, because I love HR. They're doing a fantastic job. I think I would just only add to that, because James covered it all, that we have some initiatives planned to increase our training, both for our hiring managers, groups like DICE, and anyone at the college to further understand about our inclusive practices. That's going to see really great traction as relates to our onboarding in our both student employees and other employees for the college. So I'm really excited about those things coming up. James mentioned our inclusion advocates, which we're going to do a shameless plug. We've got a training coming up next week. If you haven't participated or came to a training for inclusion advocates, do so. Get your teams on there so that they can be trained and be an advocate for the college, and also be an advocate in your division. We have an initiative coming up too about diversifying our faculty through our Diversity Fellows program. And I've got some really special announcements coming up. Not gonna give it away here. Gotta stay tuned. But it's going to incorporate what we're doing in both our integrated English and math departments and so much more. We're so excited about it. You'll also be hearing an invite really soon to have some conversation that I'm calling Stay interviews. Yep, I'm gonna release that little tidbit since I won't give the other one part up. Some stay interviews that will allow us as a college to talk about and talk with our employees about what it is about LCC that you keep coming back to year after year, week after week, day after day. We want to know what actually makes us strong, particularly from our marginalized populations and groups, and how your voices are important on how we can make that an even stronger community. We're all about making sure that our diversity is a priority in our workforce, and therefore there is going to be additional resources for our hiring managers. When you're looking for diverse candidates and talented candidates, you will have a list of, based upon the job description, based upon the career criteria, where you can actually post those job sites. And James was a little shy about it, that HR has been a real champion in making sure that we have diversification when it comes to our postings, so that we are making sure that all individuals are aware of where the greatest place to work at and what they have to offer is LCC. So those are just some of the things I will add to the amazing work that James did. And any way you want to partner or have conversation or have suggestions about how we can further this cause, you know where to find us, right? We're right here. Contact us. And thanks so much, Selena.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Thank you, James. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Bailey and James? This is a great time to ask those questions. And even if you don't want to verbalize the question, you can, send it to me privately via chat, or you can put it in the chat. It doesn't matter. It's just important that you use this opportunity to voice whatever concerns you may have. Okay, it looks like we have a question from Carlotta. And then after Carlotta, I'm going to ask Dr. Glasgow to provide some information on government relations, because there was a lot of questions about how much activity we are having with our legislators. And after that, I'm going to ask Ding Hoagland to have a conversation about advisory boards in arts and sciences. So Carlotta, can you please provide us your question?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My question would probably be for HR, basically, Mr. Mitchell. And, in the past, our institution and its employees have been really well known for wanting to improve the college and doing everything it could to improve it and working in every way we could above and beyond the call of duty. I'm just thinking right now, maybe, and not for myself, because I know I have a family member, a daughter who's going to have an operation in April, so I'm not going to be able to be involved, a major operation. But I'm just thinking for employees in general, is there any, I don't remember right now, but is there anything within our job descriptions that says we should do this kind of work within our job in some way and request that? I kind of thought if I was interested, I could just request it and see what happens. But I am interested, but I know I can't be a part of April and May. But I'm just wondering for the population at large who may not be asking this question, should one be planning their after hours to participate in this work? Or should one put forth their name to say, I'm interested, and now let's see how I fit into the system? Because I know there'll be room for at least 5 general employees to be a part of each of the, is it 3 or 4 work groups? To be a part of each of the work groups. And so I just want, kind of a general question. Is there something in the job descriptions that says this is part of your job to request, not that you'll be approved, but that you should consider this as part of your job? Or is this just a personal aspiration, desire, our own professionalism, our own commitment to the work and to our mission that we would give our time however we could? Did I make that kind of clear?
Yeah, I think I got the gist
Thank
of it.
you. Thank you.
And I really appreciate the question and the interest. And first of all, I just want to say that I'm disappointed that you won't be able to participate, but I understand your personal situation. I hope all goes well there. These work groups, and I'm sure I can be corrected, but if I get astray, but the work groups will be held during regular working hours. We're not asking anyone to work outside of their assigned working hours, and the meetings will be during the normal times, which is one reason I think that if you are going to volunteer, and I would really love to have folks step up and then volunteer to work in the leadership and areas, leadership culture and communication. I would love to have people sign up, but you should confer with your supervisor before you do so to make sure that is something that both of you think that you could handle. And I know that all of our administrative supervisors are very supportive of this process. So I would encourage you to have that conversation first, and then we will certainly work with you and schedule the meetings around the calendars as best we can of those that volunteer and work. Look really forward to working enthusiastically on these various items. And this is very important work for the college, which is why I think you see all of the leadership here talking about it. It is something important, something that we certainly encourage everybody to volunteer, to help and shape the work and the direction of the college going forward.
Thank you, James. Dr. Robinson?
I would just like to add a layer to that. James's answer was excellent and completely on point. And I thought I'd just cut straight so you could hear it from me. This is the 3rd college that I've done this kind of strategic planning work on. And while we use the word volunteer, that word is really means that we're not going to assign folks to this, that people get to step forward to what they're interested in. But this is our work. It's not like we're putting together a group to go clean up the river or do something on the weekend. It's an excellent question, Carlotta, because it clarifies some things, right? I really like the question, but to add to what James said, because I've done this at 3 colleges, all of them had organized collective bargaining agreements. This is a strategic way of organizing our work, and it really is our work. So it's a great question, but I just wanted to add that layer to it.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson.
Can I add a query? It seems like it was my understanding that even if you're not part of the 5 general employees who are in the work groups, that at certain stages the work groups will be posting information that the college that didn't participate in the work groups can feed into or respond to. Is that correct?
So thank you for that additional question. So basically, the work groups are going to work between April and May, and they're coming up with the skeleton for the strategic plan. And so that strategic plan document, after everything is combined, will be shared. It will be shared with first probably the executive leadership team and then academic senate, and we'll figure out a way to make sure that the employee body can see it. But it will also be shared ultimately with the Board of Trustees in September, and it becomes a public document. And along the way, we're going to be doing quarterly updates in a similar manner that we did before. And the interesting thing is, and I think the important thing to note is that even if you decide that you don't have time to be a part of a strategic planning work group, the product of that work group is going to be a strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, every focus area is going to have 9 projects. And so each of those projects, we're going to need a team of people to work on those projects. So even if you didn't come up with the actual design or come up with which projects will be done, you will have an opportunity to even, be on a project once that strategic plan once the strategic plan is presented and approved by the board. So I think that's important. There's other ways to participate. And so, because it's a 3-year project, basically. So we're going to need additional participation. So I just want people to know there's multiple ways that you can participate. So thank you, Carlotta, for that excellent question. And thank you, James and Dr. Robinson, for your response. I do see that we have a question. Someone is wondering if we're going to focus on our environmental impact as a college. And is that a good part of the strategic plan at all? Is that a goal or part of the strategic plan at all? So I'm going to ask our Executive Director of Administrative Services, Chris McCursey, to answer that question. Chris?
Sure. So it's interesting this question comes up in March of this year, because when I was on vacation March of this year, just before we kicked off the COVID, Dr. Samuel and I were actually working on the bones of an RFP to request consultants regarding energy management. And so we've got some of that. It's just that we've been engaged in other items, but moving forward, I don't know that I recall specifically that we have that in the strategic plan, but I think that that's certainly an appropriate thing to infuse into it. I would like to share that on an ongoing basis that Tim Marks and his team does regularly look for opportunities to implement any type of efficiencies that we can in the systems that we're installing, whether it's an HVAC system or whether it's lighting. So anytime we go into the space, the team is always upgrading the lights to LED, and so taking those things into consideration. So we're trying to do those things on an ongoing basis, but also looking to do some things that would help us to track primarily our utility usage in a much more detailed manner by using micrometering and some of those things. So I won't bore you with too much detail on that, but yes, it's on our radar. We have an idea about a path forward, and it is important to the college.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And then I'd also like to add to that we do try to be very careful about what we purchase. And if you go on the purchasing website, every year we put out a report with respect to what we're doing from an environmental purchasing perspective. And so there's information on our cleaning supplies, and there's information on our restroom supplies, and what we do with our printing and with the paper that we purchase, and even with the way that we dispose of trash and recycle. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can certainly go to the purchasing website. All you do is when you go to lcc.edu, type in purchasing, and when you get to that site, just scroll down to the bottom, and there's a tag that says environmental purchasing, and you can have access to that report. So thank you for that question, and thank you, Chris, for that answer. I see that we do not have another question in here. So for right now, one of the things, because I had a chance to preview the document that Sally referred to, the group Marilyn and team put together was over 100 pages when I first looked at it. We've done some spacing and made it single space instead of double space, so it's a little bit shorter now. But in there, I did read that a lot of people were still interested in governmental relations and what are we doing with our legislators and are we inviting them to campus and all of that good stuff. And so I think that Dr. Glasgow is the expert in what we're doing there. And since it was a question that I saw on multiple occasions, Dr. Glasgow, if you could just share a little bit about what we're doing to kind of expound on what you shared before.
Absolutely, and thank you, Dr. Samuel. It has been very enjoyable to sit back and listen to all of the amazing work, the great questions that folks are asking, and to sort of reminisce concerning several strategic planning efforts that I've had an opportunity to be involved in at LCC and see how far we have come. This is probably the best that I have seen and will position each of the groups to be very successful and to have the work spread across the group, which is going to be very helpful so that everyone is working together, because it's a heavy lift, but we have a great foundation based on previous work and the framework that Dr. Samuel has led. And so kudos to you, Dr. Samuel, and the entire team for giving us such a good framework. So as it relates to governmental relations, that work is gearing up, as Tricia Rotoff knows. Without my trusty left brain, right brain, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do, which is we want LCC to be a household name when it comes to our legislators. And we have not had one meeting in the last few months where our legislators, state and federal, have not indicated we're still top of mind. We are still the community college that they look to when they need, oh, thank you so much. Who did that? Fantastic. When they look for programs to tout as examples, whether it's Michigan Reconnect, it's Future for Frontliners, and we are bold and audacious enough to let them know that we're the gold standard. And that's not boasting without data and without proof. We are the gold standard, whether it is cybersecurity, aviation, Michigan Reconnect, student success, academic success coaches. We would not be able to do the work that we're doing nationwide, statewide, if it were not for the forethought and the work that we have done over the years, both in student and academic affairs. Congresswoman Slotkin is a regular, whether it is virtually on campus. She was able to come to campus and she spent some time on West Campus and was blown away. Shout out to Kathy Willem and her team. She met with students, talked to our law enforcement police academy, and daily, a day does not go by without my getting an email, an invitation, or our reaching out to folks like Sarah Anthony, who I'm proud to say is involved with the WISE mentoring program. We do this together. It is easy for me to do my work in governmental relations because of the amazing work that each of you do. And it's not just me, the trustees, the president. COVID has provided some challenges, but also opportunities. Because we've done so much of the work virtually, it allows us to pull in our executive leadership team meeting members. We're not going to fly everybody to Washington, but this year was an opportunity for our senior level leaders to be involved in the national summit, to be involved in a meeting that we're scheduling for April with a cabinet member in the Department of Education. All cabinet secretaries have now been named under the Biden administration. So we will now start to meet with the Department of Labor, Department of Education, to talk to them about our TRIO program and all of the other amazing things that we're doing at LCC. And so that just gives you an idea of what's going on a daily basis. And if I can just speak to the grants piece, because I believe there was a question about involving faculty. One of our focus areas with our legislators includes grants. We cannot do the work without our faculty members because they are the subject matter experts. So whether it's Jason Mitchell in the cybersecurity area, we've got to have the SMEs at the table providing us with the framework and the specifics as we're pursuing grants. What I am discovering is that, again, talking about transparency and making sure that we toot our own horns. I think we get so busy with the work that we don't always realize that the entire institution may not know the process. And so to that end, we're providing joint trainings that will come up. Don Wilski and I are working together, our teams are working together, and there will be more information concerning grants especially, so that folks understand the process and they can get involved. And so I just wanted to share, you're absolutely right. Faculty, very important. And there is a process to make sure that your voices are heard and you are involved when it comes to our grants work. Hopefully that answers the question. I'm willing to do any follow-up.
Thank you, Dr. Glasgow. And I'm glad, I think if people could mute if you're not speaking, I hear a little bit of feedback, so sorry about that. But thank you, Dr. Glasgow, and I'm glad you mentioned the grant piece because I had that on my notes that I needed to call you back to talk about grants. So you're very special and you thought about it already, so thank you so much. I do see that there's a question that was put in the chat from Martine Reef, which was about faculty involvement, and thank you for that question. What I can say is that all of our strategic planning sessions have been advertised with the hopes of both faculty and non-faculty employees being a part of that process. And one of the great things that we have tried to do is make sure that someone from Academic Senate is a part of the tri-lead that we're trying to establish for strategic planning, so that each focus group at a minimum would have a faculty member in a leadership position throughout that process. And I'm pretty sure that when we get to our projects, there will be faculty involvement with those too, as well as high faculty involvement with the academic master plan that Dr. Welch is working on. But because you put that question in there, I'm going to ask Dr. Welch to kind of look at that question and provide any additional feedback that I may not have provided. And then after Dr. Welch, I'm going to ask Dean Hoagland to talk about advisory boards, because that was a question that came up, a suggestion that we have advisory boards outside of tech careers. And so I think that we do have some, so I would like for Dean Hoagland to speak about that. And then after Dean Hoagland, I'd like Gary King, our Associate Dean of Student Affairs, to talk about Envision Green. So I just want to kind of have you guys on deck for some additional conversation. So first Dr. Welch, and then we'll go to Andrea and then Gary. So Dr. Welch?
I think quickly I can answer the question. And Martine is asking about faculty involvement. We're using or involving the Senate as much as we can. So we have asked the Senate for faculty representation for all of the strategic planning themes to be tri-chairs. We've also asked for representatives for the academic master plan. I'm trying to think of the others. As much as we've been trying to do, they also helped with Achieving the Dream Steering Committee. So everything that we've been doing, we've tried to involve the Senate, and the Senate is supposed to be the voice of the faculty. In the Senate meetings, we advertised the strategic planning sessions, welcomed them, tried to make sure that they knew at multiple times to let them know that when they were coming up and what dates were happening and which themes were happening on what dates. It's been in the STAR, also I believe Operation Email. So we've tried as much as we can to make sure that we've been inclusive for everybody. All voices are important to this, and we've been trying to make sure that the faculty feel included and wanted in these sessions.
Thank you, Dr. Welch. And I think one other thing I'll just add is that we did have that strategic planning email address just open for months for people to respond to. And it's still there if people want to provide additional information. So thank you for that, Martine. We really appreciate that. So now what I'd like to do is go to Dean Hoagland and then Gary King. And then I'm going to ask Jan, our Dean of HHS, a question. But if you guys could start. Dean Hoagland?
Thank you, Dr. Samuel. I appreciate the opportunity. So we do have some advisory boards in arts and sciences for some of our occupational areas. I think some good examples that I can think of off the top of my head, apologize, I'm not going to list them all. Accounting, business and insurance. I've actually been to some of the insurance advisory board meetings, and they have a really excellent selection of local business people in the insurance industry at some of the larger companies and the smaller ones. It's really a great group. And so we do have, especially the Perkins eligible occupational programs are required to have advisory boards and meetings, and they do. And so there are a number of them in arts and sciences. We actually, though, I think this comes up quite often because we also have some other occupational areas. Thanks, Dawn. Oh, she's sending them to me. I'm sorry, not everyone. The arts area, the sign language interpreters are also Perkins and have advisory boards. We have a lot of them. So the other area this comes up in is we have some occupational areas that aren't Perkins eligible, but they do lead to occupations with an associate's degree. And the ones that are always at the top of my mind are in our science department, actually, which isn't what everybody would assume probably, but we have environmental tech, we have chem tech, and we have molecular biological tech. And these are great career opportunities, and we're always trying to get the word out about these. And we used to have an advisory board, I'm told. This was before I was part of their department. And so I think that's something they would like to get going again. So I think that's where this probably came up, but there might be other areas as well. And I would be open to having a discussion about what they're looking for from an advisory board.
Thank you, Dean Hoagland. I appreciate that. And is Associate Dean Gary King around?
Dr. Samuel, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Can you talk to us about, that's okay. Can you talk to us about Envision Green? We had our press conference yesterday and we've been on the news lately. And I know that you were instrumental in this project, and a lot of the questions and comments that we received back during the strategic planning process was about students and them being able to be successful. And one of those vehicles included transferring. So can you help us out with Envision Green, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Apologies again for the camera being off, multitasking with the 4-year-old here, not wanting to serve to be a distraction. But this has been great. Thank you a ton for you and the team, the transparency, the level of engagement. This has been great. quick shout out to Dr. Robinson and Dr. Welch. Amazing press conference on Wednesday alongside Dr. Stanley and Dr. Woodruff, president and provost at MSU. Really just kind of capturing all the great things that we've been doing the past few semesters with Envision Green. It was kind of like the icing on the cake, formalizing some of the things that, again, we've been doing. Major shout out to our academic advisors here at LCC for collaborating with MSU Advising, MSU Admissions, all with our students in mind, making sure that we bring resources to LCC from MSU to answer those questions in a more timely and efficient fashion so they can make an informed decision. What I keep telling students and staff is that if a student has access to MSU resources earlier on in their LCC journey, that they can maybe rule that option out and then explore University Center 3+1s. They can look at other options if they're able to have more informed decisions and beginning with the end in mind type of engagement earlier in their journey. And so I think that's what a big highlight is that the presentations have been well attended by students virtually. We've kind of pivoted and converted the programming in collaboration with MSU to Zoom presentations, which allows MSU to be more flexible. They don't have to send staff here like they were pre-COVID, pre-remote operations. But very exciting that students have the ability to explore options earlier, that they're more inclined to not lose credits in their transfer journey because of, again, the level of engagement between advisors. One of the leaders of the program from the MSU side of the house, Dr. Q, and I will be presenting at the MSU Student Success Conference. We'll be recording a component of that and then hoping to make that available during PA days. Shout out to Dr. Glasgow for planning ahead to the C3R Summit and allowing us to kind of prepare and focus to report out on some of the data and some of the highlights from the early stages of this partnership. But there's a lot of great conversation about what the program could evolve to in terms of maybe guaranteed admissions or scholarships, things that aren't necessarily embedded into the one-year partnership that was formalized yesterday. But those conversations are exciting, again, because we continue to look at our current students, how to streamline the process of them getting to MSU, but also how do they feel when they get there? Do they feel a sense of belonging? Do they feel welcomed? Do they have a support system that they can hit the ground running and finish what they started with us in this awesome foundation that we've helped create? Also, how do we leverage this from a recruitment side of the house? How are we sharing this information with the community, K-12, so students could potentially see themselves starting here to get there while saving tuition dollars? So now we're talking access and affordability. I can keep going on and on and on because there's a lot of great details, but I'll save some of those for the PA days and the C3R event where we'll be able to report out. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Gary. I certainly appreciate it. I got a chance to watch the press conference too, and I agree with you, Dr. Robinson and Dr. Sally Welch. They were amazing, amazing, amazing representatives for LCC, and I'm excited about Envision Green. Are there any questions about Envision Green? You know, this is what it's all about. It's about our students and making sure that they can accomplish the goals that they have. So I would be curious before Gary leaves if we can let them know if you have any questions about this. Anyone? Well, I don't see any questions. And what I'd like to do before we close this out, I'd like to ask our
Dr.
dean.
Samuel, it looks like there is a question.
You see a question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Andrea.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So my quick question to Gary and to you, Dr. Samuel, regarding Envision Green and the possibility of expanding, and along with one of our possible goals for one of the strategic planning teams of peer-to-peer mentorship, which I know was, addressed over and over again in the meetings. Is that a possibility of something that could be part of Envision Green, or have we not gotten that far in the way that partnership can move?
Gary?
Andrea, that is a great question. Dr. Robinson included an add-on in the chat mentioning a student voice that was represented yesterday, a student, Sarah Day, who's now a special education major at MSU in her senior year, I believe. But she kind of spoke to, in the press conference, some peer mentor work that she's doing in addition to an RA position that she holds at MSU. And I think that really highlighted and got folks excited about the possibilities of what things could look like once students get to MSU, kind of partnering and pairing them with a peer mentor to, again, ensure that they're hitting the ground running and feel supported. I think you bring up an interesting point on some things that we could perhaps look at with College 101 and things that we've done at LCC to provide some mentorship. It was not included in the formal launch of the partnership, but again, there's a lot of great conversation about evolving what things could look like to enhance student success. So that is a great question. I'm not sure if anyone has.
Could I add
Dr.
something?
Robinson.
I'd like to add something and brag about Gary for a minute, because some of you were with us when we watched this film Personal Statement with WKAR. Well, Gary and team have gotten us the ability to see it and stream it on our media stream. And that's a movie about peer mentoring, really. I mean, it is the whole engine of those college-going students and their journey is getting help from their peers. The only other thing I'd say is, Gary alluded to this, but the national research on successful transfer all tells us that one of the most important data points for success of the transfer destination is students being in touch with someone at the destination institution while they're here. So you're right, there's no specific peer mentor component to Envision Green. But as Dr. Welch reminded me, there's a reason Envision Green has a 1-year time frame, because we want to probably add to a lot of it as we go through. So it's a great conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you.
Dr. Welch, did you have anything to add to that before we go on to the next topic?
No, I don't think I can add to it. I think Gary did a great job explaining the program. And it's just amazing work that they've done in the last, I think it's almost 2 years since we started the project, pretty close to it. And they really took what was on paper and made it come alive. Just great work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question, Andrea, and thank you, Gary and Dr. Robinson and Dr. Welch, for your responses. I do see one question in there that we're going to address, and then I'd like to go to Jan Karazim, our Dean of HHS, to talk about how we're being competitive in HHS, how we're really kind of looking at our programs and making sure that they're meeting the market needs. So we'll have Jan ready for that. But I see here that we had a question about how are the big, hairy, audacious goals going to fit in with our strategic planning? And that's a great question. So thank you, Lane. I think for that, every focus area has big, hairy, audacious goals associated with it. And so the hope is that when we go to come up with our goals and objectives for each focus area, that we will be aspirational. That's really what the big, hairy, audacious goals were about, being aspirational. So for instance, under the leadership culture and communication, leadership is one of those. So we had at least 5 people say, go for the Aspen or go for some other prize. And so that's something that we can consider as an aspirational goal under that focus area. So that's how we plan on using those big, hairy, audacious goals. We've got them and they're recorded, and along with everything else, we're going to consider them through the process, and we're going to really task each and every work group to look at the big, hairy, audacious goals that were presented for that particular focus area and figure out if it meets the objectives that we're trying to do for that particular strategic focus area. So thank you for that question. Let's see. Do we have any more questions before we go to Jan? And honestly, I do want to say that this dialogue is really good. And so I'm finding it to be beneficial. And so my hope is that you are too. And I'm trying to bring out different things that I saw in terms of feedback to try to make sure that we get some instant feedback on some of these things that you care about. So I appreciate your time. Obviously, this meeting was scheduled to 5, but if you need to leave, I definitely understand. We're gonna hear from Jan, and then I'll look to some closing comments from Dr. Robinson if we don't have any more questions. But we truly appreciate just this opportunity to dialogue with you. Jan, can you share some information with us about what we're doing to make sure that we're competitive and that we're meeting the market needs in the healthcare industry?
Sure. HHS, we are involved in so many things. It's where do I start? We're in meetings constantly, the team with various stakeholders. A lot of the meetings are with various employers and employer groups, as well as community college partners. And so, for instance, I'll talk about a couple of the projects that we're working on, and then one that we're just starting to dip our toe in. There is a huge need, and has been for quite a while, for entry-level healthcare workers. The all-inclusive term is called direct patient care worker, but the people that fall into that are like medical assistants and nurse aides and home health aides and those kind of people. And there's just a huge need, partly because of the people that are ill, especially during COVID times, but partly because the pay isn't so great for those positions, and so there's a lot of turnover. So HHS is involved with a group here in the state that is trying to move the pay range for those people to try to allow them to be able to have a sustainable wage and stay in those positions rather than feel like they need to leave for higher paying jobs. So we're very involved with that. We also are very involved with two groups, one called the Michigan Center for Rural Health and one called the Michigan Primary Care Association. Michigan Primary Care Association has probably 300 facilities around Michigan. 45 of those are large health centers that have medical care and dental care, and they see about 700,000 patients a year. So they came to us, LCC, and wanted us to meet their needs across the state of Michigan. Well, there is a certain capacity, so we brought in our partners, our community college partners, that are in the areas of these health centers. So collectively, we are going to be able to serve this group across the state. But what's important is LCC is leading this. We are the leader. It is our MA program that these other schools will be enrolling apprentices in of the health centers so that these health centers can meet their workforce needs. So we're really proud that we're being able to lead that effort. And these will be registered apprenticeships, just like we're doing for Sparrow Hospital right now. Another program that we're excited about is there's a shortage of registered nurses, and there has been as long as I can remember. I don't see that changing. We enroll about 192 students a year into our RN program, and yet there's still a shortage. So a nurse faculty member brought me an article about a nursing program option, and so I took it to the faculty. We talked about it, and they're anxious to go ahead with it. And what that would do, I also, backing up a little bit, I also talked with the CEO of McLaren Greater Lansing and the CEO of Sparrow Hospital, who want us to do this. And what that would do is allow them to identify workers within their health system, already employees, that would go through an RN registered apprenticeship program. So that would add somewhere between 40 and 60 students a year to enrollment at LCC in our nursing program. It wouldn't be in lieu of another option, it would be in addition to another option. These hospitals are hoping that they can use this model to increase the diversity in their nursing workforce by, supporting students of or apprentices of color into these positions. So we are really excited about that. That's going to take us some time to vet out. The nurses keep telling me the biggest obstacle is going to be the State Board of Nursing, but I just found out last week that Bo Garcia sits on the State Board of Nursing, so I'm hoping that that we have a little bit of an in there with that. So anyways, that's something that we're doing, trying to be innovative, trying to leverage the attention and funding around U.S. Department of Labor apprenticeships to meet the need. Another one that some of my dean colleagues and I around the state are talking about is respiratory therapy. Right now, accreditation has stated that as of this year, they will not accredit any more 2-year respiratory therapy programs. So we have a couple options. LCC can partner with an existing program to allow us to offer it here in the greater Lansing area. The other option, though, is to try to get some legislation changed that will allow community colleges to offer baccalaureate degrees in respiratory therapy. The deans that I've talked to want to go both routes. So there is discussion about a partner program, latching on to one of our partner schools that already has a 2-year accredited program. But I also have talked to Mike Hansen at MCCA, and I said, what do we have to do to get respiratory therapy added to the list? The reason it's so critically important now is because there's already a shortage of respiratory therapists. With COVID, the people that have been stricken with COVID, a lot of them are going to live with lifelong respiratory issues. And with them raising the bar on the minimum requirement to be a respiratory therapist, where are they going to get the workforce? Mike asked me, well, have the employers said anything? And I said, they're too busy working with their, trying to care for their COVID patients. So it's the deans that have thought about this and are concerned about it and are talking about it. So we are going to approach our employers, the deans across the state, and talk with them to see what they feel about it. Because to get the legislation change, it has to come from the employers to MCCA. So, we're very concerned about the shortage of respiratory techs. And so instead of waiting for the employers to come to us, we're trying to be proactive and going to them and offering them a couple options for that. So those are the big ones. I could go on and on and on. HHS is really busy, but those are the big ones for now.
Thank you, Jan. I really appreciate it. Dr. Krasm and Tony Glasgow said it best. You do have a great vision for HHS, and we're happy to have you here. What I'd like to do now, because we're nearing the end, is have Dr. Robinson close us out. I've totally and completely enjoyed this dialogue, and I'm appreciative of everybody for your continued support of this process. We have a lot of work to do with all of our strategic planning processes, but we can do it. LCC is worth the effort. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you, Dr. Samuel. Before I jump in, Dr. Welch, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something to what Dean Krasm? No. Okay. All right. We've had a robust discussion today, and it's just starting. It's just starting. So I want to thank everybody for their time today. I want to thank, again, Dr. Samuel for her facilitation of this process. Excellent job. And, I just want to remind everyone that we're engaging in a continuous quality improvement process. We had a strategic planning process before. It served us well. We had a good strategic plan. We put it under the hood. We made some changes, some tweaks. We're moving it forward. And this is what we do. You've heard a lot of great things that we already do. And one of our focuses going forward is how can we continue to do those things and even get better? So this has been a really productive conversation, I think, today. And just in wrapping up, I would like to also underscore the work that Dr. Fall talked about with project charters. I think that being disciplined and very specific about what we do with these projects will help with communication, transparency, collaboration, but it'll also help us get results faster, and that's important. So thank you so much for all your time. Thanks for all you do. And I know we're all working so hard right now. I'm just really proud of all of you, and I'm really excited for this work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. And remember, if you want to join us with strategic planning, just send an email, strategicplan@lcc.edu. Thanks so much.